This is the Australian Butchers Guild podcast, brought to you by Meat and Livestock Australia, the podcast for passionate butchers.
G'day everyone, and thanks for listening into the Australian Butchers Guild podcast. I'm your host, Doug Piper. We hope you're having a good year and looking forward to the next greatest butcher on your block promotion that the Australian Butchers Guild is running. It's coming up soon, so look out for your kits because they'll be in the mail over the next couple of weeks. Today we're catching up with butcher/farmer from the northern tablelands of New South Wales, Scotty Fittler. Scott's going to share some info about owning and operating a butcher shop in regional areas, along with plenty of other useful information. And we're also going to hear from our old mate Ripley Atkinson, MLA's market analyst, who is going to share some news around the current beef and lamb supply around Australia. I've known Scott for nearly 20 years now, and back then Scott was one of several shops in the Armidale area, but probably the only one who had a really good range of value-added products in his window. He was certainly leading the way for the region and had a big battle on his hands with the growing number of supermarkets that were moving into town. Scott had an ace up his sleeve. He was growing his own cattle and putting some of them through his business, which was an attraction for many of his shoppers. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Doug. Nice to be here.
How are you, mate? How's everything going for you?
Yeah, it's not too bad. We're just sort of rolling into another year and trying to figure out how this one's going to roll. Hopefully we've got the pandemic mostly behind us and we can sort of try and get some normality and consistency going.
Yeah, I bet tourism would have affected your, or the lack of tourism would have probably affected your trade up there.
Yeah, I mean, it has a little bit. I think the biggest thing that's affected us is we do a little bit of wholesale business, so the opening and closing and restrictions placed on those sort of clients has had a direct influence on us. The initial shutdown, we're in a centre outside of a Woolworths supermarket and there's 36 stores in the centre, and at one point it was just ourselves and Woolworths that were open, so the passing trade that would normally be in there for every other store just virtually vanished, you know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a lot of shopping centres have sort of suffered the same fate where, you know, lack of foot traffic past their doors, with a lot of shops not being able to open. So, mate, when did you first kick off with your butcher shops? When did you first start in the trade? And was it a family business that you were following, or?
I kicked off in 1993. I finished school in 1991. I'd been a wash-up boy, delivery driver in a butcher shop here in town, and I'd spent sort of 12 months when I finished school knocking about, and the guy that I used to work for offered me an apprenticeship, so things were pretty tough here regionally back in the early 90s. Was sort of on the back of really high interest rates. There wasn't a lot of jobs going, and I'd always sort of enjoyed the work, so yeah, that's how it sort of started for me. It was innocuous enough. By my third year of my apprenticeship, I was actually managing a business for my employer, and it's sort of just it's gone from there.
How long was it till you bought your first meeting place?
Initially, I went into business with another guy who I used to work for as well, different employers on the way in Queensland, up on the sunny coast. So I had a couple of years up there, and then decided to go our own, just the wife and I, and we moved back. We moved back to Armidale. Actually, there's a new centre being built. We got offered the spot for the butcher shop out in front of the Coles supermarket at that stage, so we took that up. Yeah. Yeah,
awesome. So that you were there for a number of years, weren't you? And then you've only just recently moved.
Yeah, so we're there for about 17 years, and the timing wasn't perfect. We sort of started to relocate, and then the pandemic hit, and sort of things what was meant to be sort of a 3 to 6 month project ended up being about 18 months, but eventually got in, built the shop with myself and one of my apprentices. Actually is pretty handy. So it all took a bit of time, but we've been in there for just over a year now, and everyone sort of says to me, "How's it going?" It's going well, but we don't really know what normal is yet, and hopefully we'll sort of get a sort of bit of a handle on that this year. You know.
I remember when early in 2000, I think it might have been 2003 or 4 or something like that, when I probably first came across you. I was selling sausage casings up and down the north coast of New South Wales, all the way up to, I think my area was from North Sydney to Ballina, and then west. So so it was a pretty big area. I remember going to your shop, and I was just in awe of what I found in a country town, like the value adding and the window display that you had in the old shop back then, and like that's going back probably close to 17-18 years ago, I suppose. But I'd never seen too many regional shops in particular that had an offer like that. So what made you sort of take that on, like looking at all the value add and the different sort of things that you were doing?
I guess we always struggled, like regionally, we sort of struggled to get the margin that a lot of people that we see get in city areas. I've got to be honest. I often look at prices other guys are charging and think, oh, geez, how can they get that, So for us, the value adding side of things sort of came about as a desire to increase margin. I've always had an interest. Initially, it started with gourmet snags back in the day, looking for different flavour combinations and things like that. And it sort of just morphed over into the value adding stuff. But originally, when I was managing a business back in the mid-90s, a guy by the name of Barry McDonald, I don't know whether you ever knew Barry.
Barry used to work for me.
Oh, did he?
He was a cat. Yeah, I had a shop in Artarmon, and I was looking for a casual butcher, and Barry popped his head in one day, and it just went from there. I think he did a couple of years for me, I think, all up, but he was a great bloke.
Hell of a character.
Yeah, hell of a character.
He was. So he rolled into. You literally walked into the butcher shop I was managing about 5 o'clock one afternoon and went, "Yeah, hi, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'll be down at the I think he said the Kitchen Deck Services Club here this afternoon, and I'm going to show you how to cut 60% gross profit out of lamb." Well, that just made me go, well, I'm there, He invited every butcher in town. There's only a couple of us that turned up. But that was the start of a pretty long association with Barry. Used to ring him up quite a bit when I was in Sydney. He'd pick me up and take me around and show me a few shops. And then when I moved to Queensland, he actually came up for a week and worked with my guys and just sort of helped to upskill everybody. He was it was a great help.
No, he certainly knew a lot. I think I had him probably early 90s would have been when he was working for me. And yeah, he always brought something different to the table, that's for sure. Like you said, he was a bit of a character. He was loud and proud, and he loved loved all the intricacy, because he'd stand there like when he was explaining something, and the hands would be going and the fingers would be wiggling around. He was very animated with the way he explained things.
Oh, he was. He was an old school showman. I remember when he was helping us for that week up in Queensland. He had no hesitation to sort of put himself out behind the counter and talk to whoever was there, and he was probably a lesson to a lot of the younger guys about what the trade looked like 20, 30 years beforehand, and how it sort of functioned, because he definitely he wasn't backward in coming forward when it came to being proud about what he knew and what he could do.
Yeah, he certainly was. Yeah, he passed away a few years ago now, but big loss for the industry, that's for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
So you're a farmer too. You grow your own cattle, or you have been for a number of years. So you were, I think, in one of our discussions we had, you were putting some cattle through your shop in the early days.
Yeah, so I've sort of I've really taken an opportunistic sort of approach to it. When the numbers have made sense, we've gone quite heavy on that, and it's been good for us. The drought of 17, 18, 19 was horrific. I've got to be honest. It wasn't fun at all. And at about that same time, I'd sort of made an arrangement with a local dairy up here to take their Wagyu and Limousin cross dairy cross calves. What this particular dairy was doing was they were joining their top 10% of their herd, their best cows, to Friesians and to more dairy bulls. But the rest of the herd, they didn't really care what they were joined to, as long as they had a calf, because then they'd lactate for another year and they'd continue to milk. So the arrangement was that I would take a lot of these calves, and so we sort of got into a program. We reared sort of in the space of a couple of years, nearly 400 or 500 calves, all hand reared, individual pens. It was a mammoth job, but I was doing that before and after work with the help of my boys. But the drought just eventually just ran over the top of us, so we had to sort of pull up on that. And the dairy farm has now since been sold, and they're not doing that program anymore. So that was just starting to come to fruition. It was really, really profitable. It was just starting to work really well for us, and we just got to the point where we just couldn't fund the feed bill for all the livestock for the drought, because it was just our farm looked like the moon. It wasn't fun, but it was. We just put that one down to experience. We will go again. We still have all the infrastructure for it, and the farm's still sitting here. It's we're running a few cattle at the moment, but It gave us great consistency. It gave us really good control. It allowed us to tell a story about our product to the consumer, which essentially was a waste product or a byproduct of another industry, which is an unwanted calf. And we were evaluating it and getting some good results with it. We were feeding them right up here at home. And we were just starting to put some really nice beef through it. It was a bit disappointing, but the farm's still there. We'll probably look to sort of step back into that later on this year and get that going. But just because we're in a new store, I've just taken this first 12 months and just wanted to focus on that wholly and solely and not have my attention sort of divided, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you don't want to bite off too much than you can chew. So the meat that you were getting off that type of cattle with the Wagyu cross, how was it, like, obviously reasonably good quality?
Yeah, it was. So it was typical Wagyu, like it's beautifully fine textured, a nice fleck through it. We were feeding a ration which was, without going into too much detail and confusing everybody, but we're actually growing grass in a hydroponic shed. So it was a predominantly grass-fed ration, so we're getting good flavour out of our beef. It was probably a marble score sort of 3 to 4, which out of a grass-fed product was really good. We're happy with that. It was eating really well. We were really happy with it. It had been an idea in my mind for a while, and it was sort of just starting to sort of click together. We had to fine-tune our feed ration a few times, but we just started to get it to the point where it was really starting to work, getting really good feedback from our customers. We're just getting the consistency that we're sort of struggling to get, through our normal supply.
There's a bloke I met a few years ago down in Adelong in New South Wales, sort of southern New South Wales, who crosses his Angus herd with Frisian cattle, Frisian dairy cows, and he reckons it's some of the best. Like the dairy cow brings a really nice bit of marbling to the meat. And an excellent flavour, and he gets very good yield out of it too. Yeah,
it's funny. A lot of people look at a dairy cow and just think there's no meat on that, and they'll be right. But the reason for that is because of the way they're fed. They're fed on a high protein ration, which protein is building blocks for lactation and muscle and skeletal development. They don't really, energy and carbs is what puts on meat and fat. A dairy cow doesn't really get fed that, but when they do, it's quite surprising, how they can actually come up. The meat's really finely textured and marbles up nicely, eats really, really well. I used to notice that all the rib bones were always really nice flat bones. The other thing I really liked about it too was, like, your navel end of your briskets and through the shoulder, and that they didn't lay down the fat like the British bred cattle did. So your saleable meat yield was actually quite surprising how good it could be.
That's an end of the navel end is a part a lot of people don't use. They normally end up throwing that into like obviously sausages or mince or whatever. And but for the export market they call it the Karubi plate, and they use it as a thin slice and slow cook overseas. So it's something that we've played around with a little bit to. Leaving the bark on the outside of it, we've been able to roast it up like a pork belly, and you can actually get that red bark to crisp up a little bit like pork crackling.
Yeah.
So it's a great little piece, and we chopped it into pieces, and we just sort of fried. We were able to get it to crackle, but then we actually put it all in a pan and sort of ended up with burnt ends and that. So it was a great piece of meat to play with, just to add value with it, especially from a food service point of view. So if butchers are out there and that obviously if they're buying carcasses and they're using their whole brisket and the navel ends going into sausages or mince, like look at doing something different with it and putting it out there. Doing a bit of research. There's a little bit online. If they want to contact us, we've got a method there that actually works for it. So I think it's such an underrated piece of meat, like a lot of the other secondary cuts of beef.
I think with the price of beef, Doug, like where it's sort of sitting at the moment, especially, and I don't think it's going to, it may come back, a little bit, but it's definitely not going to harm in price, that's for sure. So I think moving forward, we've got to look, especially for those guys that are breaking beef still and taking that approach, you've got to look at every part of the carcass and how you can value add as much as you can out of it.
Yep, you've got to. You certainly have. So cost-wise for you to do that would have brought you, obviously, cost of goods way down, like utilising your own stock.
Yeah, what we decided to do is we still booked the beef in at the market price. So essentially we had a business being the farm on one side that was sort of profitable, and then we had the shop essentially that was still responsible for cutting its margin as if we were buying that beef in. And that was just how we decided to do it. But overall, it had a dramatic effect. To put it into perspective, like there was roughly $1,000 profit in each animal before it got to the shop. So if you were doing 4 or 5 bodies a week, it was sort of 4 or 5 grand a week that was come off your cost of goods every week. So it was on top of what you should have already been making. It was a good thing, yeah.
Maybe a little bit further down the track, once you get yourself settled there in the new shop, some of these butchers listening in probably might give you a bit of a tingle and say, "Hey, Scott, what's happening with the cattle sort of side of it?"
It's one of those things that I sort of just it nearly burnt me out, to be honest. Like if you could picture 150, 200 potty calves that need to be fed every morning and then fed every afternoon, and then a butcher shop to run in between, it was a lot of work.
Yeah, a very long day, mate. So what else is happening out there, mate? What are you seeing out there in the regional areas? As trade's been relatively good throughout the Christmas period and running into summer?
Yeah, it has. It's been a bit of a surprise, actually. And we had that sort of, where the supermarkets sort of had that meat shortage there through January. We benefited from that. Our sales jumped about 30%. But at the same time, a few of our wholesale trade sort of just slowed right up. We had that a little bit of a wave where the Omicron sort of did its thing. But I think overall it's hard to identify what the business is going to look like in its current situation. We just haven't had that 12 months yet of uninterrupted trade, and slowly building all the time. We've just made a real conscious effort just to focus on just doing particular things really, really well. It's really easily distracted so that you end up trying to be all things, especially in a regional area where you perhaps, the area that you're drawing on isn't big enough to allow you to sort of just fill one section of the market. It's often regional butchers find themselves trying to do the wholesale, trying to do this, trying to do that, and trying to do a good retail job, then trying to do the value add job. And I think sometimes you never quite do any of it really as good as you'd like. So we've sort of made the decision that we're not that we're stepping away from our wholesale stuff, but we're definitely not chasing it anymore. We're just going to try and focus on that customer over the counter, getting our money on the day, not having to chase accounts. And I find too, when you're locked into wholesale supply, I've often felt that you're locked into purchasing products purely just as a supplier to those guys. Whereas with the retail thing, you get a little bit more flexibility. You can sort of chop and change in regards to, you can move products off your display and put other ones in that you can actually make some money out of. Whereas with the wholesale stuff, you're often locked into just supplying product because that's what they always want. And, you end up carrying the burden of market fluctuations because they want you to sort of be consistent on your pricing. And it's probably all right if you're geared that way. But yeah, I'm not sort of sure that that we really are. And I think moving forward, we'll make that over the counter customer and perhaps look at sort of building our online presence a priority.
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about there when it comes to wholesale. Like, that you've got to be consistent in quality and price with that, but your bread and butter's on the other side of the counter. That is where you can make some good money out of your day-to-day customers. So as we said, the wholesalers they're very price driven. Your wholesale customers are very price driven, and they need to know why you have to put your prices up all the time.
You've obviously seen it as well. Like you just build a good relationship with a particular business, and things are going along well, and to a point you've almost educated the chef to what you should be using, and they're happy, you're making money as well, and then a new chef comes in or a new owner comes along, and the whole relationship then is sort of thrown away. And you do that enough times and you sort of get to the point you just go, I need to focus on where the profit is, and the profit's definitely over the counter.
Oh, definitely. In your sausages, value add, just even your everyday traditional cuts, that's where it is. It's there's no good sort of chasing your tail. You've got to take it while it's there. Get the customers in. 100%. I haven't been to Armidale for a few years now. So you've obviously got your Coles, Woolies, you've got Aldi's up there as well. So has that sort of the retail side of it, the chains, that's grown up there, or?
So we've had Coles and Woolies forever and a day, and we got Aldi about 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've sort of noticed that the supermarkets are doing their job better all the time as well. So if we're not evolving, eventually we get overtaken. It's really easy just to continue to do what you always know. But I find, as much as I'm not a massive fan of social media and it annoys me a lot of the time, I do enjoy the aspect of that, we can follow butchers on the other side of the world or wherever they might be, and you almost get in their business every day. And you can see what they're doing, and you can tweak an idea fit to suit your own market, or you can take something that they've done and plagiarise it as much as you like. Really, I mean, your local customer in your local area is not going to know that there's a butcher in England that did this particular product a week ago, and now you've created your own reincarnation of it. So I really do enjoy that aspect of it, and I've got to be honest. I'm guilty of looking at what other guys are doing and putting our own twist on it, and seeing whether we can get some traction with it as well.
They wouldn't put it out there if they weren't proud of it, and if and if they think that nobody's going to copy off them, well, they're silly, really, because that's what I think. That's why most guys put it out there, is to show other butchers that, hey, this is what you can do with this. This is what I'm doing. But you're right, mate. Social, I hate it. I'm not a fan of it. I try not to use it too much. I know I've got an Instagram account and I've got a Facebook page, and I look at it every now and again, and I go, God, I haven't posted anything for since before Christmas or something like that, but I'm really regular. But I do like looking, I'll open it up of a night if I'm not interested what's on the telly, and I'll start looking at the Instagram account. I think that you get a little bit of a feel of what some of the guys are doing out there, and from all over the world, you've got blokes there doing stuff. And mate, there's a guy in Sydney called Brett Laws, or Lawsy. I can't remember what he goes by.
Yeah, I follow Lawsy. He's fantastic, isn't he?
Some of the stuff he does is just incredible. Probably not realistic, but he is a talented guy, and he obviously really enjoys what he does. Very passionate butcher. I think I haven't spoken to him. I actually know a guy who's his manager of the shop chain that he works for. But very talented guy, and you'd love to have him in your butcher shop. But
oh mate, he'd get a job in anybody's team. He's fantastic.
Yeah, and that passion shows, doesn't it, in the way that he does it, and he's so proud to get out there. I think he's got 20,000 followers on Instagram or something, which is just insane. Right? It's insane. Yeah. I looked at it a few weeks back and I thought, crikey, but then again, you've got other guys on the other side of the planet. Like you've got there's a guy called George something from he's at Borough Markets in the UK.
In London,
and he does the same sort of stuff. His is very traditional butchery there, I think, but he's very proud to show what he does. And it also, it's not just these guys, but there's a lot of guys out there that I see, and they're advertising what they've got for sale in their shops. And there's some guys getting up there, and they're having a good crack, and they're really enjoying what they're doing.
I think too, the beauty of sort of social media as opposed to the traditional print and radio and that sort of thing and whatnot is, you do get an opportunity. If you can engage your customer and get them onto your channel, so to speak, you can speak to them every day, whether they're in your store or not. And I think a lot of us sort of get a bit overwhelmed by that. I don't know that you really have to make it that complicated. I think just a quick conversation, just show what you're doing. We've been really given a sort of helping hand over the last sort of 10 or 20 years with there's a cooking show on every channel at some point in the day. To some respects, we can showcase ourselves the same. And if you can't sort of engage your customer that way when they're not in your store, you've only got a brief window when they are in your store. So I sort of look at it as like there's a massive opportunity there. I know I don't do it that well all the time. We're a bit hit and miss. We pick it up and we go well with it for a period of time, and then we sort of get busy doing other things, and you realise that you haven't been on the program. But I think it's done right. It's a great tool. But I saw the negative side of it the other day. I think it was Joel from the 3J's Butcher in Traralgon the other day. Had some vegans trolling his social media, So, I mean, but that aside, it's all pretty good.
Yeah, that's the risk you take, and they eventually go away. You don't give them any oxygen, and they just sort of go away. So, I think that's the best way you can treat them. Just don't entertain them, pretty much.
I agree.
I do remember your sister Christine. Is it? She used to do a lot of your social stuff for you.
Yeah, I mean, she was responsible, I think, originally for starting the Facebook page, and typical Christine, she just started it, didn't even tell me, got it up and running.
She did a great job. You could always see what was going on in the shop. She got right behind campaigns and entered a lot, and she was very proud to show what you guys were doing in the shop. So, you think about it. What's the value of, say, there's companies out there that do this for you. What is the value for them to structure some posts for you throughout it for a month even, so you don't have to touch it. You just tell them what you want. They'll send you through imagery or some information. You just sort of basically agree to what you want, and then they take it from there. That would be quite valuable for any butcher these days.
I think, especially those guys that don't naturally feel confident to sort of do it, or aren't interested in it, or don't have somebody within their business that has those skills. I don't think it'd definitely be worth looking at. I know I've considered it at different times. I know some guys have some younger people within their business that are quite, savvy on the whole social media thing. I know for myself, we've had the best success and been when I've actually sat down and I'll map out in the next 60 days, do a basic spreadsheet with the dates, and I'll put in what we're going to do virtually every day. Mm. And if I offload that to the wife, it gets done. If I leave it to myself, it doesn't.
Typical. You got to give it to somebody else to do. I think that you've got enough to do. You've got enough on your plate, so it just that one less job you have to worry about.
Absolutely. I think at times we just get overwhelmed by having to do something extra that we just don't do anything at all, and that doesn't work either.
You doing any online sort of sales, or is it all basically through the shop?
It's all over the shop front. We actually have a website that's been built. We're just populating it at the moment, so that's the next 90 days. We want to get that one sort of locked away and get it up and going, because we are behind in that respect. Locally, I sort of felt that everyone knew where we were and that we had the presence and the profile. But what I have discovered, especially since we've relocated, is we had a lot of shoppers that still shop at Coles that don't come over to the centre that we're in anymore. And after speaking to them, they quite happily come online with us in a subscription-based model, which is what we're sort of looking at launching. So they could choose how much they want to spend. They can build their own pack, and we can deliver that to whatever time frame they want, whether it's every 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it needs to be. So that's sort of the basic framework of what we're trying to design at the moment.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
All the business coaches that I've spoken to always talk about the power of a subscription-based business model. And after looking into it, I think that's the way we'll sort of try. Once you've got people locked in and sort of on a bit of a program, they're far more inclined just to keep going with it than if they have to keep remembering to actually keep ordering.
You look at the likes of U-Foods and Marley Spoon and all those sort of companies there, they would have a subscription-based clientele as well, where they'll get a week-to-week delivery, but it'll vary month to month sort of thing. So that those businesses are just growing huge, and they're taking a big slice out of butcher shops. So it's a great idea to sort of look at doing something different like that, and it'd be interesting to see how it actually performs for you.
Yeah, hopefully it'll go all right. I need to sort of do a little bit of research in respect to cold freight and how we can transport goods around and different things and packaging, which is sort of next on the to-do list, but that's where we're sort of heading, yeah.
Yeah, we spoke with Grant Hilliard from Feather and Bone a fortnight ago, and he's very all about sustainability, the environment, and provenance is everything to him about the product that they sell there. And they're using a recycled cardboard box with a woolen insert.
Yeah, so it's an insulated wool liner. I listened to that podcast, and there was a mob out of New Zealand that make a product called Wool Cool, and that was what I was looking to use as well. But last I checked, we couldn't get it in Australia. But I'll have to check with Grant and see who he's using, because I was unable to find that sort of product.
Yeah. No, drop him a line. I'm sure he'd like to share that with you. But great concept, good idea, and it's environmentally friendly, which ticks the box for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what's the future for Armidale, mate? 24 months in the new shop. What's happening next down the track?
At the moment, the next thing is sort of get our online side of the business sort of up and tracking along. That'll be our next sort of focus. And I think the biggest thing for me after that I really want to make a focus on is sort of staff development. Often they're sort of pushed to sort of the back of the queue, so to speak, sometimes, because you've got anything else going on. But, you touched on it there a minute ago, you got to find other people to do other things in your business, because often it just falls back on you, and then it doesn't get done. And I think the answer to that is by empowering my staff and keep continuing to train them up. That's where our priority will probably sort of shift in the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Dan McCarthy down there in Geelong, we spoke to him a few months ago, and he does that very well. He does that extremely well. He offloads a lot of work onto his staff, and they do a fantastic job. They just gives them a little bit of something different to do throughout the day too, rather than where the mundane things that we do day to day that just sort of breaks up the monotony of it all.
Yeah, Dan's a good operator. He's very good at sort of explaining what he needs, what he expects, and I think it gives his staff a little bit of their own job, own responsibility that's unique to them as well.
It's a good lesson to learn, I think, for a lot of butchers. You end up aging very quickly if you're doing everything yourself. So spreading the love, getting other people to do some of this work makes life so much better, and you start to enjoy doing what you like doing. I think that's a big thing. 100%.
I mean, we've all different times just felt like we're getting pulled every direction, and it's probably the one thing that can take your passion away from the trade if you're not careful. I think if you don't protect yourself in that respect, you just end up hating it. It becomes a chore.
Oh, definitely. All right, mate. Well, anything else that you want to talk about?
Actually, Doug, from a conversation we had the other day, I think a few of the guys out there might be interested to know what we're sort of doing with some of the state government incentives out there for new trainees. We've sort of signed a few of our guys up on a couple of different trainees, Cert 2s and that sort of thing. There's a $7,000 per quarter per apprentice, so that sort of money sort of adds up after a period of time. And at the moment, with the way things have been, it was sort of worthwhile looking at and taking up that opportunity.
Oh, definitely, mate. Like that's a great incentive to put butchers, to bring apprentices into the trade and lessening the load a little bit. So we're all everybody's looking for tradesmen these days. It'd be great to see more butchers do their part in bringing in more apprentices, especially with those sort of incentives available.
Yeah, I think if you've got butchers already that have done their trade, I think there's a possibility there that you wanted to do maybe a retail management Cert 2 or a small goods Cert 2. You can still take advantage of it that way as well.
Yeah, upskilling them is a great idea, especially with business management side of it in particular, because a lot of guys out there probably love to buy their own butcher shop, but do sort of wonder, can I do it? Will I be able to do it? But just getting that little bit more knowledge behind them and getting that certification, I think, would give them a lot more confidence that they can succeed.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even from the aspect of, even if they don't go on to buy their own shop, it opens their eyes perhaps a little bit to what's going on within the business that they're working in. I mean, a lot of the time they'd see the money coming in, but they don't really have an understanding of how many different ways it's got to go and how thin it gets spread before there's any left over.
Yeah, no, too right. Awesome, mate. Well, thank you very much for the chat tonight. It's great to catch up again finally. It was probably been a couple of years since we last caught you up on the Gold Coast, I think it was. So good to see you again, mate. And one of these days I'll get back out there to Armidale and love to have a look at the new shop.
Oh, absolutely. We'd love to see you up here. And if anybody's listening and they're, up in the beautiful New England, more than welcome to throw their head in the door and say good day.
Yeah, that's good stuff, mate. I'm sure they'll appreciate it, and you'll probably get a few butchers knocking on your door as they're travelling around on their holidays with their caravans like everybody else. Good on you, Scott. All the best, mate. Take care of yourself.
Cheers, Doug. Thanks, mate.
Welcome, Ripley.
Hi, Doug.
Over the past few months, we've seen a lot of butchers have had a lot of issues with supply. For obvious reasons, being the labour shortages out there. It's not so much about the actual supply of beef and lamb that's available, but it's more about the labour shortage that a lot of the processors have had over the Christmas period and leading into early this year. So how are we looking? What are we expecting to see for the next, say, month or so?
Yeah, Doug, it's a really good point you make, and I think it's a good place to start. Certainly in agreement that the Omicron wave has had or created some challenges across the beef and lamb supply chain. January was a tough month, but we've seen the first week of February really improve in regards to supply, lifting by 25,000 head week on week for cattle numbers, and sheep rose to numbers just under 15,000 head below what 2020 volumes were. So they're at 370,000 head for the week, and those two lifts in supply volumes for both sheep and lambs was really positive to see, and those numbers to us are indicative that we're coming out of the Omicron wave in regards to the challenges around processing volumes and the impact that's obviously labour's having on that processing capacity.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. That's good to hear. Obviously, we knew it was going to come to some sort of an end eventually, and things will start to get better. And also, with a lot of the visas, or a lot of the borders opening up,
Yep.
and a lot of the visa holders will be coming in, which will then help to step up the labour component in amongst the processing sector, because I know they lost a heap over the last few years, and the local and also the local population around a lot of the regional areas where the processors are, they've had trouble getting those guys or those people coming to work as well.
Yeah.
So that'll be a nice little. At least they'll have something to do when they get to work. Yeah,
definitely. I think there would have been some positive signs or some positive reactions to that response about the February 21st reopening date, to double vaccinated tourists, and obviously working holiday visa makers, which make up such an integral part of the agricultural supply chain, right from the farm gate and exactly as you say through to processing and delivering that product to market.
I remember Pat Hutchinson from AMIC talking. He's the CEO of AMIC. And he was talking late last year, and he mentioned that there were thousands of positions available through the processing sector. So it must be pretty hard, or it has been a very tough time for those guys just to keep their doors open and keep the cattle and the sheep flowing through the business.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think we've communicated or we've had conversations with industry regarding that challenge, and we've seen the impacts of that. And if industry's communicated to us that if these labour processing issues continue, it will have a detrimental effect on slaughter volumes of both sheep and lamb moving forwards. And we've recognised as the market information team that if this labour issue continues to become prominent, we might have to revise our numbers. But I think the boost of seeing certainly this border reopening and the potential for those working holiday visa makers to come back will certainly improve that situation, and it's sort of stepped back, I suppose you'd say, as an issue. But to your point, rounding it back to what Pat Hutchinson said, it's definitely been something that's been a problem within the agricultural workforce of red meat for a long time. It's something that's been around even preceding the pandemic. It's been an issue, but looking on the positive side, the borders are reopening. People have got more confidence to move around in time. We hopefully we'll see that issue improve.
So numbers wise, I suppose for the domestic market, what's the better areas? Are all the states putting through reasonable numbers, or is it sort of more restricted to the eastern states, or are the western states going okay?
Yeah, so WA, we'll discuss WA first. Its slaughter volumes in both sheep and lambs and cattle have been outperforming what historically they would have been. So that Omicron wave or the coronavirus hasn't as adversely affected the Western Australian processing sector, and they're actually doing quite well currently, and they're still performing with some strong volumes on the back of an improved lamb crop last year, or a lamb cohort I should say, which is supply following a wet winter they had. But if you look to the eastern states, the latest numbers for last week's volumes, all states are basically performing where they should be. Victoria is still below traditionally what we'd expect to see, but New South Wales and Queensland, they're certainly making up the majority, as they always do. New South Wales and Queensland account for 68% of the total cattle slaughter volumes per year, which equates to around 5.5 million head per annum based off that 10-year average. So those numbers are quite strong. And if we look at the lambs, again, it's a little bit of a similar situation where Western Australia, has been doing well. Its numbers are historically quite strong, and Victoria's really picked up in the last, I would say in the last week. Like their numbers last week were 132,000 slaughtered per week, and now we've seen Victoria up to 170,000.
It's a big increase.
Yeah, so they've certainly in the lamb space, they're really performing well, and New South Wales in a similar situation. So we know products being able, firstly, to get to the processing sector, and we know now in that increase, particularly Victoria, which accounts for around 50% of the national lamb slaughter processing volumes per year. We know that Victoria is picking up those numbers, so there's certainly supply getting there and getting it through the processing sector, into the retail space is strong at the minute, and it's certainly improving from certainly over the last month.
That's great news. So I suppose brands play a big difference too. Like a lot of guys have their favourite brands out there, and Tassie has some of the of the more popular brands out there. They're still going quite strong down there. Yeah,
and Tasmania, for example, as well. I'll just touch on the cattle first. Similar situation. They've been good, but in recent weeks, certainly last week, we saw those numbers soften. Now I know Tasmania has been that their numbers in regards to cattle volumes through the yardings have been, I'm not going to say constricted, but they've come down, they've softened in regards to supply. So that has had an impact in their overall volumes, but they have had a wetter summer than what they traditionally would experience. And in regards to the rebuild concept, which we've discussed quite prominently, that would be playing a part in how that cattle slaughter volumes are going in Tassie. But if I look at the lambs, at the minute, they're actually performing quite well, but they've also experienced that they started the year. They started the year sort of 1,500 head stronger than 2020, and that was during one of the drier periods for that state. But those numbers have certainly softened now back to sort of around what you would expect traditionally on a week-on-week volume basis. So they're still performing relative to what 2020 and 2021 volumes were. So that's still strong.
So what are we looking at, I suppose, price-wise? We're looking at some sort of easing of prices, I suppose, maybe, or are we still looking at a climbing Eckie and Wiki?
Yeah, so the latest in regards to that situation, Doug, would be we're expecting the national cattle herd to grow by 4% or 1.1 million head in 2022, and that will be driven by New South Wales and Victoria in regards to the increase in supply. And that herd increase or herd expansion, you'll say, will translate into increased slaughter volumes. So we're expecting an increase of 700,000 head or 11% on slaughter volumes from 2020, which we expect to hit the market in mid 2022 to the second half of 2022, and that's in relation to some production fundamentals. But obviously we know, and the lambs are the best example of it in relation to that spring flush. Increased supply always puts downward pressure on the market. We know that export fundamentals and the situation relating to Australian red meat demand globally will still play its part in the way that the markets move in 2022 for cattle. But we know that increased supply places pressure on the market, and the industry analysts, which was Rabobank, Mercado, ABARES, Thomas Elder Markets, and Auctions Plus and NAB, forecast the Eckie for the 30th of June at 998 cents a kilo carcass weight, which would be 11% decline on what it is now. The MLA does not forecast price, but those 6 industry analysts do, and that was what they expected the Eastern Young Cattle Indicator to be by 30 June 2022.
So I suppose a lot of people, we're totally aware about how much meat we export. The interesting part is China. Do you have any information on that at hand that you can sort of disclose? Whether is that meat going to stay on the domestic market, or is it going to be, or these processors going to be looking sort of for other opportunities out there in the export?
I suppose to start, Doug, Australia's export market is quite diversified. So in the drought year of 2019, 20% of our beef exports went to China. That's now declined in 2021 to 17%. But China is not. We don't have that really high concentration to the Chinese market, such as Argentina, for example. It's over 75% of their product. They're a massive beef exporter as well. You know, they're huge. 75% plus of their product is concentrated at China, where Australia has that diversification, and other market opportunities have been, or sort of have eventuated. South Korea, for example, last year jumped into second spot of our second largest beef exporter, rising by 3% or around 4,500 tonnes. Whilst, smaller markets and emerging markets such as Vietnam and the Philippines grew by 26% or 5,000 tonnes last year. And Vietnam, at the expense of the live export industry, grew by 18%. So those improvements or increases in product, really demonstrate how Australia's export markets are quite diversified, and there are other emerging countries that have, purchased that product. But sort of back to your question in regards to where that product will go from a processing capacity, it's not something that is disclosed or openly shared. But looking at the figures in relation to the exports, they're sort of discussing or pointing to how product has moved in relation to China and where else we've been able to send it. Who's interested?
Well, that's good. So we can look at the possibility of having good supply for the next couple of months for both beef and lamb, and plenty of stock out there for the butchers to put on their shelves.
Yeah, definitely, Doug. And I think I didn't touch on lamb, but we're expecting lamb numbers this year in regards to slaughter to increase again to 21.6 million head, which is an increase of 1.3. So that we're expecting a larger lamb cohort again in 2022, and an improvement in supply over the next couple of months due to some processing challenges which we've discussed and the feed producers have available. But lambs will come to a weight where they need to be turned off. That's, like any production system. So the increase in supply will be plentiful this year for lambs, and we're seeing that really positive or favourable improvement in regarding to beef as well, as that herd rebuild matures and strengthens on the back of the strong seasonal conditions farmers have had.
So if the butchers want to get a little bit more information, we have this available on our mla.com.au website under the markets side of it. So there's all this information is freely available for anybody who wants to have a look at it.
Yeah, definitely freely available. Available to anyone, for anyone to use at any time, and it does go into some of that that really intricate detail around what the supply is doing, what that means, and our cattle projections and sheep projections, which are released 4 and 3 times a year respectively, speak to those bigger sort of macro level things. But all of this information that I've discussed today with you is available to everyone on the website under the market reports page of the MLA.
Good on you, Rip. Thanks, mate.
Cool. Thanks, mate.
Well, that's all we have time for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the chat with Scott. If you've missed any of our earlier podcasts, simply hit the subscribe button and you can keep up to date with all our other episodes. If you have any inquiries or just want to know a little bit more about the Australian Butchers Guild, please drop me an email at butchers@mla.com.au. Thanks for supporting our Butchers Guild podcast, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.
You've been listening to the Australian Butchers Guild podcast, produced by The Sound Business.